Welcome to Charley Reed Crime Stories with your host, Charley Reed. George and Jenny Sodder were the parents of 10 children. In 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, on Christmas Eve, their house caught on fire at around 1 o'clock in the morning. Unfortunately, only George, Jenny, and 4 of their children were able to get out of the house together, but 5 children were trapped inside as the fire raged throughout the house. One of their children was away in the Army, but 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jenny, and 5-year-old Betty remained in the home, and here is where the mystery begins. That day started out as a typical Christmas Eve with kids excited for their gifts, and their father George was especially happy that he was doing well in the trucking business and could comfortably make his children happy on Christmas. They sat around and opened their gifts and talked about what their brother Joe might be doing in the Army. The family just embraced the joy and excitement that Christmas often brings. However, around 1 o'clock in the morning, the house was on fire. Jenny woke up to the smell of smoke and frantically gathered her husband, and her 4 children were able to escape. But it became painfully obvious that 5 children were missing. Now, before I continue, I must inform you that there are many different accounts to this bizarre story. I will cover as much as is needed to tell the main story, but just keep in mind that there are similar stories of the same event or events, and very different accounts of the same event or events. Once the family realized 5 kids were missing, Mr. Sodder attempted to reach the second-floor bedroom to save his children. But the staircase was on fire, so he attempted to grab a ladder he kept on the side of the house, but the ladder was missing. He then attempted to start one of his coal trucks up so he could stand on top of it to retrieve the children, but neither truck would start. One of the children ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department, but no one answered the phone. So another neighbor called the fire department and didn't get an answer as well. So the neighbor drove to the fire station to alert the fire department and told the fire chief that the Sodder house was on fire. The fire department arrived at the Sodder house around 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire started. The Sodder house burned to the ground within about 30 to 45 minutes after the fire started. Now, when I first heard about the fire department's arrival time, I didn't think that part of this story was true, but I did find out why it took the fire department 7 hours to reach the Sodder house. In 1945 in this town, the fire department was filled with volunteers. There wasn't a lot of equipment, it was a holiday, and many men were lost due to the war, so they didn't have the manpower to get a crew over there fast enough to fight this fire. Firefighters did sift through the debris for the remains of the children, but none were ever found. According to TimesWV.com, quote, "The fire department finished its search and instructed the Sodders not to touch the scene of the fire. Even so, the grieving family bulldozed the site and covered it with dirt to memorialize their lost children." According to Cruikshank, the house had time to burn itself out. George Sodder used his basement as a makeshift garage. Police reports indicate that he kept 55-gallon drums of gasoline and motors there. Cruikshank says that the fuel would intensify the heat of the fire, making it even more possible to completely incinerate the children. When the Sodders covered the embers with dirt, they inadvertently created an oven that would advance the cremation process, end quote. Now, to further complicate things, experts also say that human bones should survive a house fire. So there you go. And there were some strange occurrences reported by the mother on the night of the fire as well. Mrs. Sodder said that she was awakened at 12:30 a.m. to her phone ringing, but it was the wrong number, and when she went back to bed, she noticed the door was unlocked, lights were on, and her oldest daughter was sleeping on the couch. She also remembered hearing a rolling noise on her roof, but thought it was a dream, and shortly after is when she was awakened by the fire. Ultimately, faulty wiring was deemed as the cause of the fire, But Mr. Sodder claimed that the local power company had checked the wiring in the home recently, and the repairman found a cut phone line which would have required a ladder to access. Eventually, a man named Lonnie Johnson admitted to that crime, and it was found out he also took a tool from the debris. It has been reported that for at least 2 years, the Sodders believed their children had perished in the fire, but apparently in 1947, Mrs. Sodder spotted a child in a magazine that to her resembled her child named Betty. Her husband actually traveled to the school in New York to inquire about the child in the photo, but was denied entrance because he did not have proper identification. So he interpreted that as validation that the child in the photo was Betty. The Sodders did hire a private investigator, and other accounts from outsiders caused a stir as well, such as a lady claiming she saw a little girl's face in the second-floor window during the fire. Accounts of people saying they saw the children in various places after the fire, and even a theory that the fire was a result of retaliation for some comments Mr. Sodder, who was Italian, had made about Prime Minister Benito Mussolini, carried out by the Italian mafia, and the kids were kidnapped by them. An uncle to the children was also investigated, and DNA tests were performed on every child in his home to prove they were not the Sodders' children. And there are many, many more theories surrounding the fate of the 5 Sodder children, which also include people taking advantage of a distraught family by offering them some hope for a substantial fee. But there is a somewhat plausible theory that involves a man named F.J., who had once employed Mr. Sodder. They fell out, and F.J. was actually a co-signer on Mr. Sodder's home insurance, and had increased the amount on the policy without Mr. Sodder's knowledge. Ironically, 2 months before the fire, F.J. urged Mr. and Mrs. Sodder to take out life insurance on his children. The couple refused, and F.J. angrily alluded to their house going up in smoke and that their children would be destroyed for remarks Mr. Sodder made about Mussolini. According to TimesWV.com, quote, in 1950, the police dropped the case due to lack of evidence and Mr. Sodder's frame of mind. Every effort, precaution, and means have been taken to bring about a solution. The investigation has gone as far as possible, they said, end quote. And you would have thought maybe it would have ended there, but no. The Sodders received a letter that stated their son Louis Sodder was in Houston, Texas. Mr. Sodder traveled to Houston, Texas. However, the lady who wrote the letter refused to talk with him, and they met the boy and his brother, but the meeting did not pan out that he was definitely his son, although he did wonder about it through the years. The Sodders eventually did put up a billboard with all 5 of the children's pictures on it on State Route 16 near the site of the fire, and they offered a reward. The billboard remained there until shortly after Jenny Sodder's death in 1989. This story is filled with certainties that became uncertainties, truths, lies, heartache, mystery, and no closure. When I look at the pictures of the Sodders' 5 children, I say to myself, where are you? What happened? The torture that those 2 questions must have caused that family can become almost unbearable. This case of the 5 Sodder children is closed for some, but still remains open for that family.